Growing up, the Metroid series had a huge impact on me in terms of refining my tastes and making a lot of the foundation of what I enjoyed in a lot of future games later on. The series was kind of what I exclusively played through a lot of my childhood, with me mostly playing the games from the Wii, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, and DS/3DS era. This era of Metroid was considered the golden age for the series, with a lot of games coming out almost back to back every year, with us getting some of the best Metroid games of all time around this time. It was insane. After this era though, Metroid kind of died and it didn't really get any games or entries and nobody was really talking about them. In the back of my mind, I always wondered what could have been with the series and what would have happened had Metroid finally found that audience in the mainstream. Sadly, that didn't really come until much later. But until that time came, I always saw these glimpses through the indie and AAA sphere where people were taking these elements of exploration and the elements that make Metroidvania so fun and implementing them into their own games, almost evolving the genre in an indirect way. So you can imagine my shock when a little indie Metroidvania called Hollow Knight started to gain all this attention in the indie sphere, with it gaining such mass acclaim, and it drew in my own curiosity as a lifelong Metroid fan, with the art style seeming very appealing to my taste. So obviously, I gave the game support, and I finally got around to playing it, only for me to feel extremely disappointed and annoyed with the game, and how it felt like it lost a lot of what I found to make Metroidvania so appealing in exchange for choices that would reach a broader audience. Which kind of brings us to our topic today. Today, I'm going to be explaining why I find Hollow Knight to fundamentally miss the magic of a lot of Metroidvanias. I'll be doing this by splitting it up into categories I find to be the most important aspects of Metroidvanias, and talking about where the game fails and succeeds in these various different aspects, with progression, exploration, and atmosphere being kind of the pillars of what I find the genre to be built on. So since we got everything laid out for the rest of the video, let's just get right into it. Hollow Knight is an almost exclusively melee/magic weapon-based combat system, with you mostly attacking with your basic nail attack and gaining magic in this magic meter through dealing damage to enemies. This magic meter can be either used to deal damage or help you regain health in a pinch, often at the cost of you having to find holes in offense to charge your heal animation akin to a Souls game. This often stands out most during the boss fights, where you'll be dodging and weaving while using those openings to either get a huge punish and blast all your soul into these big attacks, or take the opportunity to get yourself into a better position. These fights are often amazing, with the spectacle being on full display here and the effort being at its highest in some of these. Defeating these bosses will either earn you loads of cash or drop one of the few moveset or movement upgrades. Bosses aren't the only way in the game that you can gain money though, as you can often find money through killing enemies, finding piles of it, or just doing certain tasks, which in turn allows you to use the money to unlock certain shortcuts and routes, or be used to buy a majority of the obtainable items in the game through shops such as keys, health upgrades, magic meter upgrades, or charms. Charms in themselves are a system of passive upgrades that you can add and swap out that take up different amounts of these charm slots, essentially making it so you can create these different builds that do these passive things, such as changing up the way you gain magic meter to also include when you get damage or increasing the length of your melee attack. In premise, it's a pretty neat system that somewhat resembles the systems within games such as Nier Automata, where in that game you give up things such as your HUD to put more into passive damage buffs. My problem with the charm system lies within the implementation of elements within the grand scheme of Hollow Knight, such as the fact that a large chunk of these charms are found within shops, which somewhat take away from the sense of discovery in the game, or the fact that a lot of these different charms don't have that insane of gameplay differences in comparison to games within even the same genre, such as games like Castlevania Aria of Sorrow with its soul system. There's a large chunk of these charms that literally do the same thing and fall under the category of increasing your nail length or messing with your health or magic meter in some not so significant way. There's some pretty cool exceptions in here though that completely change the visual or gameplay properties of your large soul blast move, making it so you could shoot this large wave of these worm creatures, or making it so you have this large shell shield around you to tank hits while you're doing this recovery magic spell. I wish these weren't the exception though, and we had more charms that fundamentally change move properties like these. Like, imagine charms that completely change the nail into a completely new weapon that attacks in a different way. It's just a lot of untapped potential I just see done better in games such as the previously mentioned Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, and hopefully this gets expanded upon in a possible sequel. Speaking of upgrades that fundamentally change up how you interact with the environment and progress the game further, you get a couple of magic upgrades that make it so you could shoot this big wave of souls upwards, or do this crazy body slam that could go through these floors and glass. Not to mention the previously mentioned soul blast move that shoots forward that is your basic punish with soul for most of the game, that much like the other soul upgrades, can be increased with their effectiveness by discovering these cool evil black soul variations of them. These, alongside some of the movement upgrades like the double jump and the air dash that can be evolved into this invincible dash move, are some of the best parts of of this game in my opinion, because you naturally come across them in the world, and it feels like a proper reward for you exploring and progressing your character. This isn't to say I don't have some critiques towards some of these upgrades though, as I find stuff such as the Grand Pound move to be heavily underutilized within the level design, with you maybe using this move like 5 times to break through the floor, and never using it again outside of maybe battle. I also found it extremely weird that they gave you this invincible dash move near the end chunk of the game, with it only being used to dash through some of these shadow beams, only for them to completely kill its usefulness in the last area for the good ending by making these saws and spears still hurt you despite the move being almost invincible everywhere else. Not to say I hate this area, as I find it to be a really fun and tough platforming segment, but this was just an extremely puzzling bit of design. I would have liked to see them implement other obstacles where you have to dash through them with the invincible dash in the middle of these like saws and stuff, just so they can like spice it up and give some more usefulness to the upgrade. Since we're already kind of talking about it though, let's transition to our next segment, that being exploration. Exploration in Hollow Knight might be the segment I fundamentally disagree with the most in terms of a lot of the decisions made when designing the game. One of my biggest points of contention with this game has to be the way the map works. In Hollow Knight, unlike a lot of other Metroidvanias, you cannot simply just hit a button to see the map and where you are in game. Instead, the game goes for a far more annoying approach to you even being able to see the rooms you've been to. You see, you must go to this weird ass mosquito dude in each brand new area you go into to even get a sense of where you've been in the overall grand scale of the map, essentially making you so you have to mindlessly wander through areas you've never been to before in hopes of just happening to run into the dude. The annoying shit doesn't stop here though, as for you to update the map to properly log where you've been to, you need to find a bench to save at to jot down explored land, which still isn't the full extent of the tedium around this fucking map, because for you to even see where you are on the map, you have to give up one of your charm slots for that. So that means for most of the game, you're likely going to be running around with a wasted slot or two because you want a basic fucking quality of life feature with the map. Speaking of basic quality of life features missing from the map, you need to buy shit from the original area of the game to even see marks on the map for shops, save points, etc. This is all just super tedious and makes some of the most simple aspects of exploration obnoxious to me. But my issues only really start with this map stuff, as I find the entire incentive to explore to be a bit flawed. Most of the time when you are exploring in this game, you are looking for 3 things, with them being either money, a shop, the very few actual upgrades within the world, or new areas, with me feeling like money kind of takes priority most of the time. Like I've mentioned before, you have to buy even the most basic quality of life stuff from shops such as charms and maps, but this extends to other aspects of progression and exploration, such as nail upgrades or doors to new areas. Want to open this door to this huge chunk of the map? Pay the toll. Want to make backtracking not a pain in the ass? Pay the toll. It's an extremely boring way of having your players engage with the world and feels less satisfying, as it often just resorts in the player finding finally enough money and just running back and forth for stuff so they aren't just getting jumped by some boss or enemies they aren't prepared for, which isn't particularly satisfying game design to me. Luckily, there is the occasional charm, which you probably won't use, or a health or soul magic upgrade that more directly helps you get stronger, but I'd say the game mostly relies on money, with the most egregious and tedious example being these little worm dudes you could save throughout the game. You see, in the beginning of this game, you run into this little worm dude in this abandoned looking village who wants his friends back who have been captured in these little jars throughout the world. If you could break these friends out of the jar, you could come back here to collect a fair bit of money and maybe get an occasional additional reward on top of that. Sadly, I find this to be absolutely terribly executed, as it results in the latter half of the game having you need to run all the way back to the beginning of the game to even feel like you've gained anything from saving these dudes. I feel like this would have benefited from the worms just giving you money up front when you save them, and maybe having a couple of milestone items you could go back to the village to get, just so you aren't as frequently going back and forth between the village and later areas. In fact, I kind of wish the game in general was a lot more upfront with stuff instead of just making you go back and forth between these points of interest when you get money. Metroidvanias are often known for their backtracking, but but I feel like this is just utterly unnecessary. One final problem I have with the exploration in this game is the level design. Often, a lot of the rooms in this game feel big for the sake of being big, with a lot of intent missing. Often, in these kinds of games, you're searching every inch and corner for secrets and upgrades that will make your exploration all the more rewarding, which this game does have to an extent, but often, a lot of the areas in this game have a big ass room with maybe a couple of lava pits and enemies that just feel like developers trying to elongate time. It's as if the game developers want to waste your time with meaningless exploration with no reward, rather than intentionally having vague secrets on each and every corner that makes thorough exploration utterly unnecessary. It doesn't really help the developers' case that they seemingly recognize this issue and made it so you could just skip a lot of these rooms when you backtrack to the other corner of the map for some upgrade that will open up a large chunk of the map. I don't really know how to explain this other than the game doesn't really pace itself at points with some of the upgrades and landmarks, where it doesn't quite hit that dopamine rush of constant discovery in games such as Super Metroid and Metroid Prime. It feels like the routes are a lot more integrated into teleporting around the place and skipping exploration of earlier areas, rather than making you feel rewarded when backtracking through tightly designed previously explored maps and feeling like this badass who's basically conquered this chunk of the map. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I don't know, it just felt like something was missing. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the atmosphere of this game, because I find that to be one of the better elements of this game's overall package. For starters, this game is absolutely visually beautiful. The cutscenes and general gameplay visuals of environments, characters, and visual effects are absolute standouts within the Metroidvania genre and are among some of the best 2D games in terms of pure artistry. The game is dark and brooding and has some really good character design that stands out and has a unique identity to it. I really enjoy the animation and how fluid a lot of the bosses look. It's hard to explain, but it just feels natural and fits the world super well. Like, if there's anything to really praise this game on, it's the art style. But that isn't to say I think the game is flawless in this department, as once again, I have a couple of nitpicks. A sentiment I've echoed with my friends that I've gotten a bit of shit on for is the fact I feel like a lot of these areas don't feel particularly distinct. I often saw a lot of people throw this criticism towards Metroid Dread, and honestly, I feel like this game is far more egregious to this. The game, for as pretty as it is, often kind of boils down to the same blue-gray tones throughout the world, with a couple of standout moments here and there, with the pink mines of Crystal Peak or the gloomy ethereal glow of White Castle, but I just feel like there could have been a bit more work put into making absolutely every area feel fresh and new. I don't know, I just got bored of a lot of areas on a visual level pretty quickly. Another aspect I feel like isn't particularly stand out for the most part is the soundtrack. While the game has a couple of moments here and there that go pretty hard, I feel like the music is extremely understated and doesn't leave much of an impact. Like, it feels like the music is lacking those absolute bop series like Castlevania or Metroid have, that you could hum to yourself. Just a rather standard orchestral score is fine. I don't know, I would like something a bit more. Music is the most subjective art form in my opinion though, so I'm not really counting this aspect against the game. In conclusion, for as negative and down I've been on this game, I don't think it's the worst game ever. The game actually kind of mostly frustrates me most because the amount of potential it shows with some of the systems and aspects of presentation that could truly make this game something great, but sadly in execution result in an overall mixed bag of a game for me. I feel like the game's priorities fundamentally try to appeal more to the Souls crowd of boss-to-boss combat rather than a Metroidvania sense of exploration and discovery. This kind of makes me despise the fact this game has been used as the poster child for modern Metroidvanias when we have absolute gold from both the indie and big hitters in the genre. It's been absolutely infuriating to see people only exclusively play this game only to write off the rest of the genre because the foundation of the genre prioritizes completely different qualities. Hopefully this opens up the general audience gain from Hollow Knight to want to maybe explore other games within the genre and maybe even look at some of their favorite games in a more critical eye, which to me is something fans of any piece of media should do. If you enjoyed this more critical look at Hollow Knight, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps with the channel and lets me reach a broader audience while making even higher quality content. It also lets me know when I'm doing stuff right. If you enjoyed this video or just absolutely hate this video, please leave a comment below. I would love to see your guys' takes on this game, but for now, thank you guys for watching. I am Sleep, and I hope you guys have a good day. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!